Hi guys, Leanne here. I know I haven't posted videos in a while, but I'm starting up a new video series. This video series is going to talk about the issues we face as teenagers. So, I hope you guys like this video series. This segment is going to talk about teen suicide. There have been numerous cases about teen suicide, and if you need help, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Write that number down, just in case you need help. Okay, so I'm going to start off listing off facts. So, a lot of the common factors in teenage suicide are cyberbullying and depression, substance abuse, alcohol, and you can also notice some extreme personality changes. In this past year, 14.5% of high school teens have seriously considered suicide. And when I think about that, it makes me want to cry. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among 13 to 24-year-olds. And it's also the third leading cause of death among 10 to 14-year-olds. Which really surprises me, because I never really thought that a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, or even a 12-year-old would have suicidal thoughts. It's just something that I never really thought about. I never really knew. I always thought that suicide is common among kids my age. Like, I'm 16, and a couple others that are 15 or even 18 years of age. And what I also didn't know is that guys are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than girls. And females are more likely to attempt suicide than males. Which is really interesting to think about. And there are numerous cases in the past, which even I didn't know about. In 1996, more teens and young adults died of suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, sorry if I said that wrong, influenza, and chronic lung disease combined. And in that same year, 1996, suicide was the second leading cause of death among college students, third leading cause among 15 to 20-year-olds, and fourth leading cause among 10 to 14-year-olds. From 1965 up until 1987, suicide incidents among teens and young adults nearly tripled. And I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but each year here in the United States, there are 5,000 cases of teenage suicide. There are also approximately 12 youth suicides every day. And that really speaks to me. You should be really thankful for the life that you have, all the friends that you've made, and your family. Not that many kids have what I have and what most of you have. And because of that, I probably feel lonely and depressed, which can eventually lead to suicide. And you shouldn't be afraid to talk about it to someone, because talking to somebody helps you. I know it helps me, and it may help most of you. And I've seen a lot of things that say that anyone who's having suicidal thoughts, that they don't talk to somebody because they fear that talking to somebody is just going to make it worse. But that's not true. You should talk to them about it and help them get the help that they need. Don't just sit there and not do anything about it, not help them. You can make a difference in their life. Don't wait for a scheduled doctor appointment. Take them to the ER. And when you get to the ER, you can do a psychological examination without an appointment needed. And that can make a big difference in the teen's decisions of life and death. Nearly 60% of suicidal cases are committed using a gun. Which brings me to the topic of Russian roulette. I used to think that Russian roulette was a game. I used to think it was a stupid game that somebody just came up with. But I learned that Russian roulette is a way of committing suicide, and you have a 1/6 chance of the bullet not being there, and all they do is put the gun up to their head and keep pulling the trigger, hoping that, the bullet's there or not. Russian roulette is just I don't know how to describe it. It's just a technique that, somebody with mental illness, and they're really messed up in the head, and they didn't take any help because they didn't want to tell anybody about it. So they're basically just taking the chance themselves and risking their own life as they have that gun to their head. Boys are more likely to commit suicide using guns than girls. And they're also more likely to hang themselves or even jump from high places. While girls with suicidal thoughts, they are more likely to overdose on pills or they cut themselves. And there's a story about this 15-year-old guy named Josh. And the story is from the year 1999. And I have a story to share with you guys. In 1999, on the evening of Friday, August 6th, Josh's 11-year-old sister flew into Vancouver International Airport after attending a special summer school in Israel. Her parents, Ben and Jude, had tried to get her older brother Josh to go with them to meet her plane. But Josh refused, and he was 15 at the time. The Platzers, though disappointed, didn't insist. Their lanky, red-haired son was clinically depressed, and a psychologist had suggested they give him space. So, Josh, who had completed 10th grade at Point Grey Secondary School, went to his best friend's house and watched videos with friends instead. And he never came home. He never saw his sister again. And his phone had never stopped ringing. And he had hung himself on his best friend's porch. And this guy was Canadian, and this is why his story matters. Canadian suicide rates have tripled over the last 30 years, with young males accounting for most of the rise. After road accidents, suicide is the second leading cause of death among Canadians aged 15 to 24. 3 times as many males as females die by suicide. While females are more likely to think about it and attempt it, males are more likely to complete it. Yet families, friends, and the healthcare system do not understand enough about teen depression and suicide. Worse yet, few people want to confront the issue because it is so painful and shameful to the family of the victim. But the Platzers agreed to speak out publicly about Josh to alert other parents to behaviors that signal when a teenager is thinking of committing suicide. They wanted to urge teens, teachers, and other adults to speak up when they know a young person is obsessed with thoughts of death. Others knew more about their son's anguish than they did, and it didn't alert them. By others, they meant doctors, psychiatrists, and the entire healthcare system. Because Josh, like so many other teen victims of suicide, had already been diagnosed with depression and was receiving professional help. Only a month before his death, his parents had been told that Josh was not in an imminent danger of suicide. Friends also know more than parents sometimes, but there's a very strict code of confidence amongst young people, especially when it comes to revealing problems to adults. Plus, they don't always recognize the severity of the symptoms. Josh talked a lot about his funeral, but his friends did not see the danger in that sort of talk. Teachers and school counselors also need to pay more attention to the thoughts and ideas expressed in essays and artwork, and to consider that a high number of missed classes could be due to mental distress, rather than delinquency. Josh had handed in a very dark essay and wrote constantly in a suicide diary. And Josh's story matters because the symptoms of his increasing despair were so typical, yet those around him were unable to help because they didn't recognize what was happening, and they didn't share the information. Josh's story matters because the work it has inspired many. Because the work it has inspired may help another community to prevent tragedy. Don't be afraid to talk to adults about what you're going through. And one of the biggest causes of this is cyberbullying. There have been 14 cases noted using texting and video messaging, and Facebook and form spraying are mentioned in 21 cases. And for those of you who don't know what form spraying is, it's a social media site that you use and you can answer questions on it. You can ask others questions. It's basically just asking and answering questions. But many people don't use it to ask questions. They'll make comments and they'll send very hateful messages. I've been a victim of cyberbullying many times. I've been called a fag and a whore and even lesbian. And a lot of those times I was so hungover about it. And I've told a couple people here and there about it. But then I've also told my parents about it. And since I told my parents, like, nothing has really popped up. But I learned to just deal with it. It's happened to me so many times that I'm just, like, kind of used to it, and I just push it off. And people do hate. And a lot of times I've been able to pull myself together and just, like, I'd express kindness in return. And other times I tell them that, you know, what you're doing is wrong, right? What you're saying to me, I mean, this stuff, like calling me a fag and a whore and lesbian, doing this stuff is called cyberbullying, and it can lead to teen suicide. And you should stop, because what you tell other people, your words can really affect somebody. And it's not just actions. Words can make a difference in somebody's life. And your life too. And what you say can tell somebody else a lot about you. So if you're constantly putting others down and calling them names and just being really rude to them, you know, that's going to tell other people, oh, I don't want to be around this person because they just have a negative attitude about everything. And just because you have a negative attitude about something that you're struggling with, don't make others around you miserable because of what you're going through. If you want to talk to somebody about it, talk to somebody. But don't go around hating on other people just because you've been negatively affected. So if you're struggling with something in your personal life, don't take it out on other people. And that's a sin that I've committed so many times. I've been angry and sad, and that's made other people around me miserable. And I apologize if my bad moods have ever affected you. I'm really sorry. And, you know, at least half of teen suicides are related to any form of bullying. And there was a large increase from 2003 up until 2010, 2 years ago. And there were 56% of suicidal cases occurring in that time period alone, and there were 44% of suicide cases from the beginning of last year, in January 2011, through this April. And the Bible also talks about struggling and emotions, and I found a verse in Job chapter 7, verse 11. I cannot keep from speaking. I must express my anguish. My bitter soul must complain. And it's basically telling you, don't be afraid to express what you're going through. Don't be afraid to tell somebody else that, you're going through a rough time, and don't be afraid to talk to people. And also, be wise in your decision making. Be friends with people who you can trust and you can confide in, and just trust people and talk to people, and don't be quick to make assumptions. Don't be talking to somebody else and telling them that you're having a rough day, and they mention one of your other friends' names, and don't just automatically say oh, well, they're gonna judge me, and they're gonna give me a bad reaction to this, and they're gonna negatively affect me more. Don't be quick to assume, because if you know that you can't trust somebody, and you know that that person will be quick to make you feel bad and judge you, if you know that's gonna happen, don't be friends with them, because you want to keep a positive group of people around you. So, this is video 1, and there are many more to come. Some of the other issues I'll talk about include peer pressure, and more information about cyberbullying. And I hope you guys like this video series. So, for now, I'll see you later.